One of the most maligned zombies maps in recent memory, Voyage of Despair is often cited as one of the many reasons Black Ops 4 died such a painful, deserved death in this little community. But now that the dust has settled, was it really as bad as everyone, including myself, claimed? Well, let's take a closer look at the map and find out. Let's just start out with the most controversial part right away, the map design. Now, this is the point where many of you will likely twist your head 900 degrees and whisper, "Boy, what?" But as Christ himself once said, give me a moment to explain. Due to the map setting, it's A, massive, and B, made up primarily of CQC arenas. Sure, there's a handful of more open areas thrown in here and there, but the majority of the map is quite cramped. And the cramped nature of the map all but eliminates the popular strategy of kiting, which will absolutely piss some players off. But I've never really been one to utilize that strategy. Not talking down to anyone who does, but I just don't find it fun. I've always found it much more fun to be constantly running from place to place with zombies hot on my tail. And for those who enjoy that style of play, Voyage's map design absolutely accommodates that. For everyone else, I can see why you don't like this one. Now let's discuss the map size. Voyage of Despair is, for lack of a better term, fucking massive. Usually I dislike maps that are this big, but I think it's actually acceptable in this case. There's just enough well-placed fast travels to make the sheer scale of the map much less oppressive than it normally would be. This is in stark contrast to another equally huge map, Blood of the Dead. That map has two problems with its fast travels. First off, they're so spread out and in such useless locations that no matter where you are on the map, you probably still have to leg it 4.5 miles to actually utilize one, so you're not even saving all that much time. Secondly, I don't think these should really be called fast travels. Just look at how long it takes compared to Voyage's fast travels.
Let's do this. Okay, hit it. Go. Start. Do it. Start. Do something. Go. How do I do something? Go!
Another result of the map setting is a much more cinematic and linear early game. The early game setup always involves the player trekking to the other side of the ship to reach the Sentinel artifact. But there's multiple paths of approach, and each of the main paths has branching points with different gear and arena types. For example, the dining room route takes a bit longer to traverse, but it's much more open than the first class lounge. Additionally, if you're playing with friends, you can get a bit creative. Let's say you're playing a fairly coordinated run with friends. You can have one group go one way, grab all the parts and open all the doors, and have the other group do the same thing. While it may take longer to get to the artifact if you take that approach, by the time you get there, most of the ship will be open and you won't need to backtrack for shield or distillery kit parts. There's a couple different ways you can approach the map's early game, and there's not one approach that's objectively better than the other, just different pros and different cons. And I really like that. So often in maps with multiple avenues of approach, one route will clearly be the best one to take. Also, little cherry on top, there's a Bowie knife wall buy on each route, for those of you into that whole stabbing thing. Another well done map element is its use of lighting to guide the player and highlight important map elements. I've mentioned this many a time before, but Treyarch is great at using bright lighting and varying color temperatures to assist new players. I could explain in depth what I'm talking about, but I think it's better to just show you first. First off, the shield piece locations. As you can see, these parts are largely placed in very well lit areas, especially this part right here. The way the light casts on the part is much more likely to catch the player's eye than if you were to hide it in a dark corner. Another way the lighting helps the player is how hallways and corners used for map progression are lit differently than others. A new player who boots this map up will see things like the differing color temperature and, naturally, be drawn to it, which will help them continue their map progression. This makes the progression of a player's journey feel more natural than if you were to just have a bunch of signs or character quotes telling you exactly where to go. It gives you, the player, the feeling of discovering things yourself, even though, in truth, the game is helping you out. But the big distinction is, when they do it like this, it doesn't feel like they're holding your hand and telling you exactly where to go. That's still kind of what they're doing, but you don't feel it. This use of color is one of Treyarch's strongest suits in the past couple games. Even their worst maps, like this one, still make wonderful use of color and lighting to help the player out. Moving on from the map design, let's talk about the map's new wonder weapons. Like many a Blundell endeavor, Voyage of Despair features a solid new wonder weapon with multiple elemental upgrades. Take a shot every time they fall back on that trope. But hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Voyage's wonder weapon is the, thematically appropriate, Kraken. The base Kraken is a triple-barreled cannon that can be acquired from the mystery box, or a small side quest where you summon an actual Kraken to deliver the weapon. Thanks, B. A neat little detail that I really like about this side quest is the implication that the ship's stoker was into some really creepy shit. They don't go in depth into it, but it's a nice little bit of world building to mull over. Now, after you build the mixing table, you can use a catalyst body part to mix one of the 4 new ammo types. Each type drastically changes how the Kraken performs, and each fits a very specific playstyle. For those that like to run and gun and don't want things in their way, the electric ammo converts the weapon into a high-powered shotgun with a massive spread. But if you prefer to hold down a specific area, you'll probably gravitate towards the ice ammo. When fired, it'll create a freezing tornado that slows all enemies caught inside. Now, the balancing of these variants isn't perfect by any means, but there are a few things put in place to make it so that one doesn't necessarily dominate the others. The electric variant is probably the best one for most players, but if you try to use it against the Blightfathers, you'll find that it does next to nothing. You just don't give a shit, do you? This is the only Kraken variant that's nerfed against Blighters, because if it wasn't, there would be literally no reason to use any of the other variants. And the Ice Kraken is balanced by the fact that its Windstorm doesn't actually apply all that much bonus damage to the enemies caught inside of it. Its primary purpose is to stall an enemy's advance. And if you're not really one for the specialist kind of things, and just want, a jack of all trades, the Poison Kraken's the way to go. And the Plasma Kraken, yeah, I haven't been able to find a real use for this one, but hey, 3 out of 4 good variants ain't bad, right? Moving on to another controversial topic, the special enemies. Voyage of Despair introduces 6 new enemy types to the zombies gameplay loop. The most common of these are the Catalysts, of which there's 4 unique elemental types. Plasma Catalysts, slow-moving, high-health enemies that explode whenever a player gets too close, much akin to a napalm zombie from Shangri-La. Electric Catalysts, which unleash a supersonic scream at players within a short range, briefly blinding them and messing up their audio. Poison Catalysts, largely standard enemies that emanate a toxic cloud around their person. While the gas doesn't really do all that much damage, that's not the point. The point is to be a soft area denial enemy that delays health regeneration so other enemies can finish the player off. And lastly, the Ice Catalyst. These little goblins are by far the most dangerous of the Catalyst types, as they will actively avoid the player and instead focus primarily on strengthening their allies. Any zombie juiced by an Ice Catalyst will have 3 times their normal health and deal an additional 25 damage per hit. Something I really like about these enemies is that they all have a built-in counter, the alternate ammo types from Pack-a-Punch. Each Catalyst has a specific ammo type that, when killed by the corresponding ammo, will cause them to create a massive elemental explosion, killing all basic enemies in range. This addition helps bring another layer of planning to your loadout. A very small layer, but a layer nonetheless. I really like these additions and how they spice up moment-to-moment gameplay. I feel like their inclusion helps Chaos's gameplay stand out when compared to Aether's. The only change to Catalyst I would make in this map would be to tone down the spawn frequency, especially these little buggers. The next enemy is the Blightfather, which is probably my favorite zombies mini-boss since... No, it's actually my favorite. They emerge out of standard zombies like a Catalyst and have multiple means of attack. They can shoot homing projectiles at the player with very strong tracking, slash at them in close quarters, and lastly, they can grapple the player from a distance with their tongue and drown them in its vomit.
Finally, my extremely specific fetish has been catered to!
Additionally, they can lock down any buyable on the map, similar to the Warden of Alcatraz. What makes the Blightfather so well designed in my opinion is the fact that each of its special abilities can be disabled with precise fire. For example, shooting its pustules on its back will disable its homing attack, and destroying its jaw will prevent it from grappling the player. So while just shooting it does still work, those who take a more tactical approach to dealing with enemies will be greatly rewarded. Another standout is the map's soul-heavy enemy, the Stoker. Stokers have a ranged fireball attack with weak homing capabilities, and should they be left alive for too long, they can become enraged, breaking out into a sprint that'll allow them to easily catch up with unaware players. But like the Blightfather, they have specific weak points that are extremely susceptible to damage. When Stokers spawn, they're covered in coal, which acts as a sort of armor, but break away that armor, and it's smooth sailing. Basically, Stokers are just a better designed version of the Russian Manglers from Garand Krovi. What makes them better than the Manglers though? Honestly, it's the homing attack. The Manglers' ranged attack had tracking strength similar to that of a Blightfather's, which was stupid. Stokers and Blightfathers are how special enemies should be designed in my opinion. They hit hard and are quite dangerous, but aren't completely ruinous to the map's gameplay loop and flow like a pack of Moislers can be. Look, I love you World War II, but the fact that you can lose multiple pieces of Geistchild within seconds to Moislers with no reliable counter it's not great.
Fuck you.
Now that we're through the gameplay side of things, let's talk about something I think is grossly underappreciated about this map, its atmosphere and art direction. Voyage manages to capture the elegant beauty of the Titanic while injecting its own unique horror fantasy elements at the same time, resulting in some areas, like the dining room, that are genuinely kind of unsettling to think about. Through visuals alone, you're able to piece together little vignettes in your head about what happened in each area. This is what's referred to as visual storytelling. Honestly, the map's visuals are genuinely amazing. Okay, well, that's kind of inaccurate. The visuals themselves are pretty iffy, since Treyarch's lighting engine is like 7 years out of date, but the art direction and style of the map is wonderful. The recreation of the Titanic is surprisingly period accurate, and Chaos's unique elements bring a genuinely creepy vibe to certain areas. It's clear that they were trying for a bit of a horror light theme here, and I'd say they did a pretty good job. Now don't get it twisted, it's nowhere near as effective as the nightmare fuel of Nazi zombies, but for a Treyarch map, it's the closest they've come to spooky since, I don't know, Mob of the Dead? Along with the art design of the environments, the zombie designs themselves are amazing, but they're ultimately betrayed by the terrible lighting and material handling of Treyarch's engine. To showcase what I'm talking about, here's a few of the map's zombie models with upscale textures and better rendering. And this is why every time someone says Treyarch's assets look terrible, I get a little defensive, cause they don't, they look great, but Treyarch's engine just does the assets so dirty. And last but not least, the new cast. Every story needs great heroes, and Voyage of Despair introduces us to 4 new and very unique characters. Scarlet Rhodes, a masterful engineer and adventurer on a quest to save her father from the ever-mysterious and creatively named The Order. Fun fact, she's actually responsible for designing many of the pieces of tech used throughout the mode. She designed the Zweihander, ballistic shield, claymores, portable sentry guns, and frag grenades seen in the Chaos maps. Everything besides the Zweihander and shield is purely speculation though, but the style of her ballistic shield fits in right with the others, so I'd say there's a wee bit of merit to that little headcanon. Diego Nicali, a dashing Mexican spy with a love for any adventure or woman crazy enough to feature in his next dime novel. Stanton Shaw, a masterful old chemist with a crippling addiction to the same substances he mixes. And finally, Bruno Delacroix, a hulking tank of a man with a troubled past, desperately seeking redemption for his part in the accidental murder of innocents during a failed assassination. 3 of these characters have a lot of great quips and really help drive home the slightly more adventurous tone of Chaos. Diego and Shaw have a lot of great fun lines, and Bruno has an appropriately dry sense of humor that serves as a nice contrast to the other 2. I will admit though, they don't have much in terms of actual character development or depth just yet, but as an introduction to a cast that I'm certain will carry us through many future adventures over multiple games, they work quite well. Why the fuck do I even bother getting invested in anything? With the surprising amount of good covered, it's time to discuss what's not so great. First and foremost is that the special enemy spawn rates are absolutely ludicrous. Many players have this idea that Chaos spams catalysts like no one's business, which is simply incorrect. But I can't exactly blame them for that viewpoint. I'm fairly certain that this very common misconception comes from this map. While playing the other Chaos maps, the catalysts don't actually spawn in all that often, and they're much more manageable. But in Voyage, holy shit! I'm fairly certain that the spawn rate is roughly tripled from other maps. If you don't believe me, grab the Cataclysmic Daily Challenge and see how quickly you finish it compared to if you were to try it on the other maps. I guarantee you'll finish it at least 10 rounds earlier. The last gameplay element that's map specific I want to discuss is roaming Pack-a-Punch. I've never liked this feature, and every single time it appears in a map, I find myself rolling my eyes. I've always preferred the old style of doing Pack-a-Punch, where it was either placed away from the main playing area like Kino der Toten, or in a high traffic area that you gain access to at the end of your map journey. The golden standard for Pack-a-Punch locations, in my opinion, is probably buried if I'm completely honest. You always know where it is, and you have to weigh the risks of going to it. It's in a very risky location with only one exit, but the benefits of Pack-a-Punch, especially in the older games, just might be worth it. Just be sure to plan your journey properly so that you don't get cornered. However, when the Pack-a-Punch roams, it just feels like a gimmick because there's always some areas that are better suited to it being there than others. In Voyage, when the Pack-a-Punch is at the bottom of the staircase, it's, without splitting hairs, an actual death trap. But if it's on the poop deck, it's no bother. You'll be just fine. This inconsistency leads to a general feeling of, I think I'll just wait a round or two for it to come to the safe area. Remember what I said in my Buried review about dominant strategy? If not, it's a theory that states if a player is given the optimal way to approach a situation, they're always going to use it. Apply this to Voyage's Pack-a-Punch. Why would any player risk dying and cutting their run short to Pack-a-Punch a weapon when they could just wait a bit for it to arrive at a place where there's little to no risk? In the past games, you could leave crawlers to Pack-a-Punch at the end of the round, but explosives are so absurdly powerful in Black Ops 4 that it's next to impossible. Plus, the zombies constantly respawn if you get too far away from them. Honestly, whenever I see a crawler in this game, along with World War II, I find myself shocked like, oh yeah, crawlers are a thing. As much as I dislike this feature, there is a useful bug you can exploit here. If you know which round the machine will move, you can put your weapon in the machine, end the round, and when you get it back, it'll have full ammo. Why? I don't know. Another silver lining is that at least there's an Easter egg that allows the Pack-a-Punch to appear at all locations, and you're told where it is at the current time. So, what's your excuse, Blood? This last gameplay element isn't even Voyage's fault, but it's still an undeniably massive issue. Despite the map's layout being actually quite good, it's completely ruined by Black Ops 4's zombie respawn mechanic. The way this mechanic works is that zombies will be killed off and respawn closer to the player if they get too far away, in an effort to keep the action flowing. In theory, this is a great idea, but in execution, it literally makes every single map in this game worse. Even great maps like Ancient Evil and Tog der Toten suffer immensely because of this. The biggest problem with this system is that the respawn range is just far too short. You can get, maybe 20 meters away from an enemy before the game decides to respawn it closer to you. Usually in front of you as well, which results in a lot of those, "Are you fucking serious?" kind of downs. You know the ones, where a zombie jumps out of a window in front of you and its collision blocks your way forward. That's not your fault. There was nothing you could have done. The game just decided to fuck you. I thought that maybe this wasn't the only game like this, and maybe my memory was just biased, so I extensively played previous zombie modes to see if this respawn mechanic was ever this bad. It wasn't. Even in EXO and Infinite Warfare Zombies, games that I think are just okay, the respawn mechanic doesn't trigger until the player gets much farther away from them, and there appears to be a longer delay between zombies respawning and becoming an active threat. As for Black Ops 3 and World War II, the system still exists, but you hardly ever notice it, especially in World War II's case, where the zombies are a bit slower than average. So the system in Black Ops 4 was intentionally cranked up to ridiculous levels in a hollow attempt to keep the game's pace up, likely attempting to account for the newfound power each player is given due to the special weapon system, which is an entirely different rant for another day. This is not how you do it. As much as I dislike some of the game's design choices, IW Zombies achieves this effect so much better. Zombies are still fast in that game, but they take a while to respawn and become a threat again, which leads to bursts of intense action where your decisions still matter, as opposed to the constant nonsense like in Black Ops 4.
This is it. This is the whole game.
Moving on from the gameplay to the map's writing. First and foremost, let's talk about the characters, primarily everyone's favorite red-headed ball of angst, Scarlet Rhodes. Oh boy, what an unpleasant character. Before I continue, I'd like to mention that the character was improved substantially in Ancient Evil. But for now, it's fair game. Also, I've got no problem with a strong, confident, resourceful female character leading the show. After all, it was just fine when Nazi zombies did it with Marie and Olivia. Hell, after the sausage fest of absolute hunks that is Primus, or rather, was Primus, I welcome it. But so many writers think that the best way to write a female lead is to shorthand it. Usually it goes a little something like this. She's mean, emotionally distant, and doesn't afraid of anything, but she's also really attractive and everyone likes her, and she's great at everything and has no real flaws and can beat the shit out of everyone even though she's like 5'3" and 100 pounds. These are often referred to as Mary Sues, or in a male character's case, a Gary Stu. This fits Scarlet to an absolute T. Listen, I like a strong, confident woman who could kick the shit out of me as much as the next man, but there comes a point where you're trying way too hard to have your character be cool, and it comes off as obnoxious. So basically what I'm trying to say is that Scarlet is a multiplayer specialist. I'd like to compare Scarlet to a similar character real quick, Jessica Rose from Shadows of Evil. Now you may be thinking, wait, wasn't she kind of a prick too? And you're right, but the character has logical reasons for behaving like this. It's established that she wants to be a legitimate actress, but found herself stuck as a dancer at the Ruby Rabbit. She's sick and tired of everyone simply treating her like a pretty face, and her inability to succeed has made her cynical and jaded, giving a perfect explanation as to why she lashes out at everyone. You may not like her, but that's kind of the point. She is not a good person, which fits with the map's theme of sin, whereas Scarlet is just a bitch for the sake of it. And that kind of leads me into my next problem about the character. Scarlet Rhodes just does not fit in this cast. Everyone was a miserable piece of shit in Shadows of Evil, so Jessica fits right in. But the Chaos cast isn't like that. They're much more fun and exaggerated characters. Even though the rest of the cast doesn't really have all that much going on yet in terms of actual depth or character development, they're still entertaining in their own ways. Shaw's a drugged out goofball, and Diego's a womanizing prick that fancies himself the most charming man ever born. Even Bruno, despite being much more quiet and reserved than those two, has an amusingly dry sense of humor that serves as a good contrast to his more animated compatriots. Scarlet, on the other hand, is just unpleasant in every way. She doesn't joke around, except for like 1 or 2 out of 1,000 lines. She talks down to everyone around her, and she just radiates this unlikable energy that you simply do not want to be around. It's like having Wings of Redemption in your crew.
Keep in mind, I do not joke around. I do not giggle. I do not try to have fun. I do not try to laugh.
I think that one of the many reasons Chaos just didn't work for a lot of people is because of this character. When you have such an immensely unlikable lead, it's harder for the audience to connect with the story and the world. I think that's why Black Ops 3 Zombies connected so strongly with people. You know, aside from the great maps. Edward Richthofen is such a sympathetic, multi-layered lead in that story. So naturally, you're more invested in the character, and you're probably more keen to see what kind of trouble he can get himself into. Admittedly, the final issue of the Chaos Zombies comic and Ancient Evil gives Scarlet a flimsy reason for her attitude, and she actually becomes a much more likable character in Ancient Evil. But it doesn't change the fact that she remains very unlikable in Voyage of Despair and 9. It's such a shame that Scarlet turned out like this, because I like the idea of her character and her role in the story. An adventurous, accomplished engineer and born leader that gathers an unlikely team to rescue her father from a cult of religious extremists. It's very Indiana Jones-esque in that way, and it could have been quite fun. And to wrap up the bad, let's talk about the map's placement in the release cycle, or as I like to call the segment, the tragedy of chaos. Let me state right off the bat that, like Dead of the Night, this isn't the map's fault at all, but the fault of what might have just been the worst way to introduce a new story ever conceived. Voyage of Despair makes constant references to the party at Alistair's mansion and the events of Cambodia in which Shaw and Alistair encountered prima materia, which would be fine, but when the map released, Dead of the Night had been delayed to the DLC cycle instead of a launch map, and Shaw's issue of the Zombies comic hadn't even released yet. Because of this, the audience feels like they've been plopped into the middle of an ongoing story with no real direction as to how the hell we got there. This, and just how unlikable Scarlet is in the first 2 maps, is why I personally think Chaos didn't catch on like it could've. Let's imagine for a moment that all of the Zombies comics had released before Black Ops 4's launch, and the map release cycle was as it was originally intended. So we would go Dead of the Night, Voyage, DLC 1 would be 9, and DLC 2 would be Ancient Evil. We would completely understand why all these characters harbor such strong loyalty for Alistair Rhodes, which would explain why they're so eager to help Scarlet find him. We would have been properly introduced to the world of chaos with Dead of the Night. We'd be able to piece together from that map and the mystery music video that Alistair reviving Bruno in the first comic with the Scepter of Ra unknowingly put Bruno under the influence of the Order. So much would have made sense right from the get-go. And all of this is proven by the fact that now that all the maps and supplemental material have actually been released, Chaos feels like a rich, well-realized world. It's just so disappointing to see something interesting fall victim to such a poor release schedule. Also, launching it right alongside the ending arc of Aether, which has a lot more fan investment, probably wasn't the greatest idea either. I'm of the opinion that no matter what they did, Chaos was always going to be crushed under the weight of Aether's finale arc. However, if they had actually properly introduced Chaos and all of its universe elements in the correct order, this story could have had a greater chance to capture audiences. As it stands now, should all the rumors of the next game be true, Chaos botched its only chance and will forever be seen as that one weird story that Treyarch never got to finish. Black Ops 4 Zombies? Who am I kidding? The entirety of Black Ops 4 was such a mess that it's genuinely kinda hard to believe. And with that depressing note, let's move on to something that's a little bit more fun, the nitpicks. In the intro, if you look closely, Shaw actually has 2 watches. This is because the watch he's holding is actually a separate model that's attached to the character via script. In the outro, the mesh for the diamond camo can actually be seen on Scarlet's Welling. This is because the mesh for the dark matter and diamond camouflages are actually always present on the model, but are usually properly hidden during gameplay by hiding the tags associated with said mesh through script. When Scarlet pulls her bandana down in the intro, it glitches the hell out in the back. When the cultist turns to run from Scarlet, she's nowhere to be found, despite the fact that she's right behind him in the context of the scene. There's a lot of small continuity errors in this part of the intro alone, which I don't understand why that even happens. This isn't real life and each animation has to be scripted to play, so it shouldn't be all that hard to keep continuity with previous shots, right? The sinking Titanic card in the outro looks awful. For those unaware, card is a term used for what are essentially cutouts from a snapshot of a rendered model plopped into a scene to save resources. To showcase what I'm talking about, you see the zeppelins in the sky of Shattered Throne? Those aren't actually models. Those are just 2D cards that are so far away, you can't tell they're not a model. I know resource-wise, it wouldn't be the greatest idea to have a copy of the ship's geometry in the background, but couldn't you make the card look, I don't know, just a little bit less terrible? And lastly, the reflection probes in the mirror of the first class lounge are not great. So overall, Voyage of Despair had a lot more going for it than I initially gave it credit. It benefits from a wonderfully realized setting, fun new wonder weapons, well-designed special enemies, and pretty good map design. Unfortunately, the map is dragged down from true greatness by Black Ops 4's zombie respawn mechanics not gelling with the map's layout, and insistence on spamming the catalysts, which would otherwise be welcome additions to the zombies meta, an awkward slot in the release schedule, and, for the first time in Treyarch's catalog, an immensely unlikable lead character. I didn't really like Victus in Black Ops 2, and Ultimus Richthofen started really getting on my nerves towards the end of Black Ops 1's season, but I never actively disliked any of Treyarch's leads until Scarlet. Although I gotta admit, she ain't bad to look at. And I'm cancelled. Great. Also, I don't usually subscribe to the theory that if you just put this map in another zombies game, it would be great. But in this case, it's an apt statement. If this map was on any other game's zombie AI and mechanics, I'd go as far as to say that people would really love this one. But sadly, Voyage of Despair and its compatriots, no matter how good they may be, will always be tainted by the stain that is Black Ops 4 Zombies. Well, that's all for today. If you enjoyed and you would like to see more, check the description for a playlist of all of my previous zombie reviews. I think you'll like some of them. But anyway, thank you for watching, I really hope you enjoyed, and have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Okay, the video part is over. If you're a new viewer and don't care about an update, you can shut the video off here. For the rest of you, let's talk for a minute. I know this one took a while to finally release, not as long as the Buried review, mind you, but still, it took longer than it normally should. And that's because, along with some personal issues that I won't get into here, I just was not feeling it. I started this review on March 24th, worked on it for a week or so, and then didn't pick it back up until almost 3 months later on June 24th. Most of my free time has been spent on a retrospective of the Saw film franchise, which I aim to have out on Halloween. From live streaming, I noticed that there's a surprising amount of you that wanted to see more of my movie stuff, so hopefully this will sate your hopes. The script for the video is roughly 3 hours long right now, which is easily my largest project to date, and yes, I do plan to actually finish this one. I've already completed 4 of the 8 reviews, edited them and got them all together. They're good to go. I know I don't like to give myself credit because I fear that it makes me look like a conceited prick, but I'm super proud of how it's shaping up so far. I've put countless hours of research into tracking down old interviews, listening to audio commentaries, watching behind-the-scenes documentaries, all that good stuff, to make sure that this is something I do right. I even got series actress Shawnee Smith to record a little bit for the video, in which she explained some of her inspirations behind her character. I did that about a month ago, and I'm still kinda geeking out about it. I know this retrospective probably won't be everyone's thing, and that's fine. I was just a bit tired of doing only zombie stuff, and wanted to branch out for a minute, you know? Plus, Saw is probably the franchise I've obsessed over the most. Y'all thought I was obsessed over World War II zombies or extinction? You ain't seen nothing yet. Alright, I feel like I'm starting to ramble at this point, so thank you all for watching, and talk to y'all later. Take care.